Imagine your name is picked in a lottery, and you're forced to go fight in a war you don't believe in. Now, imagine someone else can just pay their way out. What would you do? In 1863, thousands of Americans answered the question with violence. Before we get too far into this, let's make sure we understand a couple of key words: draft and conscription. This is just forced military service, a government requirement that citizens serve in the military. And then just during the Civil War, it's important that you understand that the Union needed more troops and soldiers, and so Lincoln calls for a conscription. And in that conscription, there's men 20 to 45 years old will be required to serve if they are called. They have to register. You can see a registration card here, and then their names would be put in this big wheel, and it would be turned to kind of mix everything up. And if your name was pulled, then you were expected to serve. But you, of course, could avoid service by paying $300 or by hiring a substitute. Now, this is why some people say it was a rich man's war, but a poor man's fight. Many working class men felt like this was unfair, understandably. They couldn't afford to get out of it. Well, why would the government put this kind of deal together where you could pay your way out? Well, not only did they need soldiers, they also needed money to fight this war. So this was a way they could both raise money and fill the ranks that they needed to for the United States Army. Of course, this does not go easily, and it leads to draft riots. The worst riots happened in New York City in July of 1863. Thousands of people riot for several days. They burned buildings, including an African-American orphanage. They attacked draft offices, targeted wealthy citizens, attacked abolitionists and black Americans. And there was most certainly a very strong racial component here. The violence became racial and very deadly. So why did people riot? Well, the main causes: there's anger over the draft, there's economic inequality, there's fear that freed slaves are going to be competing for the jobs, for these jobs. Many of these people that were rioting was primarily Irish immigrants. These immigrants in many cases have not been in the United States that long, but they are now citizens, and now all of a sudden they're being called to fight in this very deadly war and dangerous war. And others, wealthy, can get out of it. African Americans aren't being drafted, and so there's a lot. And not to mention, just historically, there's been a fair amount of conflict and racism between the Irish and African Americans prior to this, and so there's just a lot of racism and tension in the North, and particularly in the cities like New York, where there's a high immigrant population. And so that all of those things combined lead to the rioting. So what are the results of this rioting? Well, over 100 people killed. The most common figure you see is 119, 120 people or so are killed. The federal troops were sent in to stop the riots. They are successful at stopping it, and the draft does continue. And so while soldiers were fighting to preserve the Union, Americans in the North were fighting each other in the streets. The draft riots remind us that the Civil War tested not just the nation's army, but its people.